I wanted to begin this interview by letting you know, Lance, I really appreciate the privilege of getting to interview you today, as always.
Thanks
Um,
for having me, man.
yeah, and of course, you don't really, well, my name is Aaron Richmond and you're on Aaron's Opinion, but I found out about your podcast just by watching other videos and hearing some of the work that you've already been doing. I don't think you know much about me or my podcast, but I'll gladly get to it in a moment. But basically, my first question that I would ask any guest, including you, is who is Lance Johnson?
Whew. That's a loaded question, right? I could gotta go deep for that answer, right?
So
but I,
we'll start really deep. So I start with that question because I want guests to be open and that
yeah,
is that Aaron's Opinion is an open podcast.
yeah,
So just sort of walk through the story and as things unfold, you'll be surprised at how easily we get to where, the conversation kind of unfolds itself. So go for it.
yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Lance Johnson, and I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm from North Carolina, and I have a podcast called the See Through Podcast, and it's a podcast that is creating transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. It's basically a format where I bring, similar to, Aaron's podcast, I bring guests on and I chat with them about, whether if they have a vision disability, I talk to them about, life with that disability. But, I talk to a wide variety of people with a wide variety of disabilities. And yeah, I do it all right here in my bedroom. So yeah, that's the quick intro.
And it's a great intro. So I started Aaron's Opinion. So by the way, I'm 30 years old.
I'm
I was born.
31.
I always like to give people the background because people always like to know.
Yeah.
Great, I love your spirit of competition. I'm loving it, man. This is so good. So I started Aaron's Opinion a few years back because my day job is I'm a teacher and I've been
Okay.
teaching for 6 years and I was listening to a lot of podcasts around the blindness community and I just found that they were not open enough. As you
Mm.
noted in what you were just saying, they weren't really, in my opinion, transparent. So I
Right.
wanted to create an environment where people, no matter who you are, blind or sighted or whatever country you're from, and we've been blessed with guests from all corners of the globe here on Aaron's Opinion, but I wanted to create a podcast that's truly open and helps blind people all over the world to share their story. And that's really what I'm about and really what I do. So, very similarly to what you do, we bring people on. Most of my guests are blind, but I've interviewed a lot of sighted people too, of course, and we talk about their life experiences. So,
Okay.
Lance, one thing that really stood out to me in your perfect intro there is your notion of and if you know anything about my channel and my podcast is I love to philosophize. I love to really dig deep. So you keep mentioning this notion of transparency. Tell me about a time in your life where you felt that others were not transparent in understanding who you are.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Uh,
Because it's like saying, because here's the thing I noticed. You keep focusing on transparency. Well, if we focus on transparency, you're giving me a clue that things are not transparent, right? If I say this is my opinion, which it is, I'm telling you that other things that I could be saying are facts. But right now you're on an opinion podcast. So think, dig, in the back corner of your brain for a time where you felt, hey, other people needed to be transparent in understanding me. Go from there.
yeah. I talk about transparency a lot, and it kind of ties into the name of my podcast, the See Through Podcast, which is kind of alluding to transparency. Yeah, because I wanted to have a podcast just like you, that where everything is open and, um, real conversations are being, had, and sometimes you got to be a little vulnerable to be open, and sometimes people get closed off and they want to protect themselves, protect their image, which is what I did for the longest time, because I have retinitis pigmentosa, um, and I was diagnosed at an early age, but I didn't start experiencing symptoms until my early 20s. And I kept putting off, telling people around me that I had RP. And that was me not being transparent. And yeah, so that was an example of myself. And then when I started being open about my RP is when I started to actually accept my RP and feel better about it. So, it goes both ways. I have to be transparent myself. And then when I open up, other people might open up. And that's basically what my conversations are on the podcast. And, when it comes to other people not being transparent, then I'd have to say, whether you have a disability or not, it's hard sometimes to get, real honest conversations. And there's a lot of small talk out there. I'm from the South, I'm from North Carolina. So we all know small talk, and sometimes it can just be a courteous exchange of words between one another. But I've always liked to have more philosophical and deeper conversations that are, beneath the surface level conversations. And, so sometimes I've learned from experience that if you want to have those deeper level conversations, then you kind of have to start those conversations yourself, to make other people feel comfortable to have those conversations with you. So yeah, it ranges from the small talk from people around you. Everyone wants to put on a facade on social media and whatnot of what they think they want people to see, and be very particular about what they broadcast about themselves. And my podcast, it's polished, it's clean, but at the same time, my conversations I try to have them have a grittiness to them, where sometimes I don't sound good. Sometimes I admit that I don't know what I'm talking about, and my guest will admit that sometimes. And that's what I just like to set myself up, kind of like your podcast, where it's just conversation, free flowing. And you don't really know where it's going to go, but that's what makes it exciting, because of that transparency, and where it can take you. It can really open a lot of interesting doors when it comes to conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like the way that you approach what you're saying. Your philosophy is definitely right, that we have to basically practice having these conversations in order for other people to realize that it's okay to talk about these various things.
Definitely.
I have found that I'm someone who, well, I can tell you a little bit deeper off the air. I admit to you, I can be private about certain matters, but
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a small community near Washington, D.C., and I never really grew up around other people. And I think that one of the challenges of that when you grow up in the countryside is that you don't really understand how to have a conversation, So that's kind of a skill that I think a lot of people who are living in all sorts of small towns all over the country are not really experiencing. So, but what made you want to leave beautiful North Carolina for New York? Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just only basing it on the weather. The weather's better in North Carolina the whole year than it is in New York.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely right about that. Yeah, North Carolina has it all. It's
Right. So why? So don't just duck the question there. So why did you leave? If it has it all, why did you leave?
Short and simple answer would be public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Due to having RP, my field of vision is diminished, where I have some central blind spots, and my peripheral is kind of closed in more than the typical person's vision. And driving just was starting to get a little tricky, and I didn't feel confident behind the wheel of feeling safe behind the wheel. So I decided to quit driving. North Carolina, like most of the country, is very car centric. You have to drive everywhere you go. And in New York, you have the public transit, you have the subway. So I moved to for the Subway. I'm also a video editor, um, which is, I went to film school even though I knew I had RP, um, which is a whole nother topic. But yeah, I'm a video editor, and there's a lot of work here in New York for people in my industry. So it's kind of a double win. There's a lot of work here for me, and it'd be good for my career. And on top of that, I don't need a car, and I can get anywhere I want to.
Really good, really good. I agree. I agree. So, well, then how did you talk more about your experience, studying film and really unfold your interest in film and video editing and what is it and how do blind people participate in film in the film industry? I think that's a topic that a lot of people want to learn about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in high school, let me start with I was diagnosed with RP in the 6th grade, so I was like 12 years old, um, and And the only reason I was diagnosed because my mom has RP. She's legally blind from it. And the eye doctor was, kind of monitoring my vision, noticed some things in my retina. And I went to a specialist and was confirmed with, diagnosed with RP. Um, so that's right before this. But I kind of took that knowledge. I was young, naive. I just kind of suppressed it. And, we went on to high school. I was always goofy, and kind of the class clown, I guess you would say. And I got in with these new friends in high school, and we wanted to make some really silly movies. And so we made some silly movies. One was called Mutant Rat Attack, and it was about giant mutant rats attacking my small town of Hope Mills, North Carolina, which is where I'm from. And I had so much fun making that goofy horror movie that I decided I just wanted to keep making movies. Then I realized, oh, you can go to school for it. So then I went to school for it in UNC Wilmington. And, all the while I know that I have RP, and I know that, film is a very visually heavy field to go into. But I figured, my vision's fine right now. My mom is legally blind, but she still has some central vision left. I'll be able to pull this off, and it doesn't matter because I'm going to be, the next Steven Spielberg. That's what I thought in my mind. And so yeah, I went to film school and graduated. Worked on a few sets. Kind of learned then when I was starting to experience RP symptoms, if you want an obstacle course for someone who's visually impaired, especially someone who doesn't see well in low light, then go to a film set because they're dark. They're filled with cameras, tripods, lights, sound equipment, props. There's just unlimited obstacles. So I noticed then that I was a little slower than some of the people I was working with that do certain tasks. And and I also noticed I didn't really have much of a passion for on-set work like that. So I kind of switched to marketing and then was a videographer and editor up until I moved to New York. And then in New York, I just focused on editing because, like I said, being on set was starting to be difficult for me with the amount of vision I do have, especially when it's a low light situation. Plus, I'm a better video editor anyway, so it kind of just made all around sense. But if someone who's visually impaired wants to be a part of the film industry, then I would just say, today's the best time ever. If you want to be a filmmaker, you have a 4K camera with an iPhone, and there's all these different tools and technology that you can utilize, to help you. And, there's a million different ways to make a movie. And I would just say, if you want to be in the film industry, there's certain tasks that I would say probably are off limits if you're visually impaired, just being honest, just because they were, on set requires so much, out of being quick on your feet. But in post-production, if you still have a good amount of central vision, or you can use a computer, you can likely edit. Like, take my friend Sam Seavey. I was on his podcast. He edits, he has, Stargarts, and he edits still, and just has his own unique way of editing. So there's ways to kind of adapt and learn. But I would recommend going into post-production or directing, or writing. I wouldn't advise being a camera operator or a gaffer, or someone who does lighting.
Right, right. So this is all really good. And then so exactly how do you define video editing, and how do you define the job and the role of the video editor and post production? I mean, what do those people actually do? And, can you put it into context and give specific examples if you want?
Yeah. Video editing, it's the last piece of the puzzle of a film. So basically, you write a script, you go shoot the video, or documentary, narrative, whatever, music video, and you get all the footage shot. I take all that footage and then I cut, it all together, and basically piece it, and maneuver around, and make my own piece of the, basically reorganize all the pieces into my own puzzle that I think, has the best feel and vibe to it. That's the most simplistic way, but it's a lot of, picking the best shot. There's multiple takes. There's picking the best music that's going to fit the piece. There's creating titles and word graphics that go over them. There's outputting the video in a specific format. I do a lot of work now in New York for social media. So I'll work for clients, and I'll make videos for Instagram stories and different formats: square format, vertical format, horizontal format, different codecs for different, uses. Like, if you want a really high quality image for a screening, but you want a more compressed video for, YouTube, so there's a little bit, it's like kind of like half creative and half just technical. It's one or the other. You got to be good at both, basically. Yeah.
Sure. Excellent. And then it seems like this interest in film editing, video editing, really bodes well for someone who wants to start a podcast. So I told you about why I started Aaron's Opinion a few years back, but really, what steps did you take to get into podcasting, and what was your, true, what was the thing that really pushed you into it? Because I talked to a lot of people, and very few of them actually, well, some are podcasters, but many are not. And I say, you should start a podcast. And the person would say, no, that's not for me. So it's not quite as easy as people may think. So what really pushed you over the edge and really got you into podcasting?
Yeah, I really like podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but let me backtrack, so I guess that's a natural thing, is like, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I just from the amount of listening I've done, I kind of had a feel for the format and of how they work. And, since I'm an editor, I'm not only dealing with video, I'm also dealing with audio. So I know how to edit audio, and I have a skill set for that. So, but backtrack even further, I moved to New York. I had finally been open to my workers, and when I quit my job, before I moved to New York, I quit my job. And right before I quit, I told my boss that, why I'm leaving, why I'm moving to New York was my vision. And that was the first time ever in my life I told my employer about my vision loss. So then I moved to New York, and I knew I wanted to do something that allowed me to talk or be open about my vision loss, since I had just finally come clean to my friends, loved ones, and coworkers about having RP and I moved to New York, I felt like I had a clean slate and I kind of wanted to ride that wave more. I was a creative person. I'm a filmmaker. I made a few short films and things like that. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make a documentary. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 6 visually impaired artists and I'm going to film a documentary on them and their life. I started doing research on this, trying to put the pieces of that puzzle together. I realized that documentary had already been made. Basically, I found Rodney Evans' Vision Portraits film. And he's a filmmaker who's also based in New York. He has retinitis pigmentosa himself. And his film was doing very well. It's gotten to some larger film festivals. I watched it. I love it. I was like, well, he basically beat me to the punch on that idea. So then I was like, all right, back to the drawing board. And again, like I said, I was a big podcast listener. So I was like, I'll just make a podcast, I can do that from my bedroom. I can do every single aspect of it because that's another advantage of podcasting over filmmaking is a film. When you make a film, it's so collaborative. You need a ton of moving parts. You need someone on camera, sound, lighting. You have actors. You have hair and makeup. You have to write a script. You have to have food on set. And you know what? All that costs a lot of money too. And then it's just a massive undertaking to make a movie. I don't think people understand that enough, how much of an undertaking it is and how much labor goes into it. And how many people are involved. I mean, you watch a movie, look at the credits, how long the credits can be. And so I was like, you know what, let me just simplify it. I'll simplify it down to just me because I have the knowledge. I know how to design to a basic sense. I'm not a graphic designer, but I'm familiar with Photoshop. So I make my logo. I start making a Squarespace website. I start getting all my platforms ready. I come up with all my branding. I've worked in marketing, so I kind of have a feel for copywriting and language and how to promote yourself. And I had, and I just kind of put the pieces together. I had my friend gave me a microphone that his friend had gave him. So my first 49 episodes that you can go listen to right now.
Click the link in the description. Click the link in the description for more information.
Yeah, those were all recorded on a microphone I got for free. I've since upgraded. This is a new microphone, by the way. But right. That first 49 episodes, was a mic I got for free, and then I was using software that I was using already for my work as a video editor. So I knew what I was doing, and I made a few documentaries. I was used to interviewing people. So I just, start putting pieces of the puzzle together, and I do my first episode that turns into 2 episodes. And then I get all the way to 49. And that so far it's just been audio, but now I'm really going back to my roots of how I know how to do everything is video. And I'm going to be putting out video episodes starting January 2nd.
I'm pleased to hear it. I'll tell you that I started out on audio too, but then when I started uploading to YouTube, simply taking the video file, putting it on YouTube, that really helps a lot. More people watch Aaron's opinion than listen, but most of the listeners are from the United States, and most of the viewers are from overseas. So if you do both on your podcast, you'll get 2 different audiences, the YouTube audience and then the podcast audience usually from different parts of the world. So I'm
very excited about it. I'm going all in on YouTube. YouTube's my new platform that I'm going to promote more than anything.
Well, that's so good. That's so good. So, you mentioned before that you've made several documentaries. So, I really hope that you do make more documentaries. What are some documentaries that you still hope to make? And I guess now that I'm thinking through this, you said that someone else, beat you to the punch when you wanted to produce a documentary. I mean, what would happen? Obviously, you can't call it the same thing, obviously, but what would happen if 2 blind directors, film people in New York, videographers, let's call yourselves.
Okay.
What if both of you and the other person, someone Rodney, I've never heard, I haven't heard the name, but let's say both you and that person make documentaries about the same thing. I mean, really, like, how would that go over? Like, what would exactly happen? Would it work? Would it create controversy, or would it actually encourage people to be more supportive and just even make the issues even bigger and better?
Yeah, great question. I mean, every movie out basically is a kind of a rip off of some other movie if you really want to break it down, you know. So it's not like I couldn't make the doc. I just realized that someone had already done it in a very professional way with more resources than me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I probably wouldn't be able to make something better, just being honest with you.
You know what?
So
Yes, go ahead.
but if you wanted to give me like a $1 million, or you give me a decent, I mean, a million's a lot, but you want to give me a decent budget, yeah, I can make the same film. I'm not saying I can make it better because I don't want to not I don't want to say
Well,
that, but I would
well,
make
how about
something different that uh would compete for sure, I think.
yeah, yeah. Well, there is another choice here. You could just give me $1 million and then not make the film.
Yeah, I'd actually prefer that actually.
Yeah, actually, that might be less work, actually. But
Yeah.
as you can tell, I love to kid around. I love to joke around and be sarcastic with people. But yeah, but you know what? You know what you could do is one of the secrets. Well, it's not a secret if I'm saying it, but I have taken a lot of inspiration from other great podcasters who
Oh yeah.
are more experienced than me, and that's why I love creating my content because
Hmm.
people who are more knowledgeable than me have shown me that I can do it. So you should take that film that you say claim to be better than yours or better that kind of um, out of your league. It's something that you could produce yourself. You could take that as a sense of inspiration and say, you know what, I made my documentary just because I loved the documentary that Rodney made, and it inspired me further and showed me that I can produce great things. It's almost like saying that other documentary is so good, it's kind of giving you permission to kind of push the edge of the envelope and create something else that could also be really, really good. Apart from all of that, I mean, as you can tell, I love to interview people. And the other secret is I love being interviewed. So I really hope that you would still have some inspiration to make another great documentary to go along with all the other great documentaries. It never hurts when you produce something great. Is I guess my
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah. And I'll say this, like I started this podcast and it started out as just that, a podcast, and it still is just a podcast. But the deeper I get, involved with it, the more opportunities I see, especially if I want to, build up my YouTube channel. And I'm working on. I've been writing a bunch of scripts for some videos that I plan on making. Um, uh, so I'm kind of blend. I plan to blend the format, so it's like almost like podcast. My podcast meets a documentary, and maybe who knows? Like who knows? Maybe one day I'll have a series of the See Through podcast, documentaries where I do portrait pieces on various people within a disability, and they're very well produced little short docs on people. I don't see why that's off the table. I would love that, but for the time being, I'm just trying to get my podcast going and build something there first before I get too ahead of myself. But yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, really good. You said that you are writing some scripts for your videos that you want to upload. So why write a script? Why can't you just, or why? I guess not. Can't's not the word, but what is the disadvantage to just going off the cuff and just being really natural? How does writing a script truly help? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. Writing a script, basically what it does is like you can wing it, and I wing a lot, and sometimes I like when I improvise more than I like when I write a script. But it's almost like I would compare it to your personality type, or and that can be the style of the video. So you ever go on like a vacation and you don't have any plan and you just kind of show up, or the person you're with doesn't have much of a plan and you guys just show up somewhere and then you just have to figure it out yourself. And sometimes that leads to a magical adventure where you end up somewhere you didn't expect, or you stumble on a restaurant that you probably wouldn't have otherwise, and it kind of works out in your favor. Um, and then you also have those experiences where you don't have a plan at all and it's a catastrophe and you're just driving around looking for things and that's your whole day and then it backfires on you. That would be the same kind of thing with a script. Is like you have it's just kind of structures your thoughts and allows you to basically condense your message into a tighter message. That way you're not wasting people's time. Attention spans are very low. So if you're trying to write a video that keeps people's attention, you want line to line to line to kind of flow and be concise. And sometimes when you freestyle something, you get a lot of fluff. And, if you just want a really tighter piece that's more controlled and concise, then you would write a script. And I'm talking specifically about like content for this podcast. For if you're asking me about a film, then, without a script, the actors don't know what to say, unless it's a specific type of film where it's all improvised, which does happen. But a lot of the times, and I'll end with this for this question is my personal style. Going back to the vacation example, is I like to have a list of things I want to do somewhere, or an idea of what I want to do each day. And then kind of once I start going, then I'm more capable of improvising because I kind of know my limits. And that's the same thing with a script. Like an actor can read the dialogue written on the page, and they'll get to know what the director or writer's messaging wants to be. And then they're able to run with it even further and make it even better. So sometimes a script is just step one of three, to getting that message across. And the script constantly changes. And then you'll think you'll have the perfect script, but when you start recording it, it always ends up a little different. So I don't know. It was a little bit of a ramble, but
That's what I wanted. I want to ramble. Good. Yeah, that does make sense, I guess. I think that, I don't know. I think it depends on the style of the podcast. I think a lot of podcasts go really well, in the ear when we listen. I think a lot of it goes really well when we just have a natural conversation.
yeah, all my podcasts are natural. And basically what I do is I have I have a bunch of talking points that I want to hit. And I don't, whatever order I get to them, I don't really care. I have a list of talking points, and those are very improvised, but I do my research beforehand. That way I know where to guide the conversation. I kind of know before I talk to someone what exactly I want to get out of them.
So you have yeah. I really like the words that you use and the way that you express yourself is really, I really like that. That's, it seems like we think a lot of this in a very similar style here. This is really good. So then if you know what you hope to gain from interviewing a guest, then I would have to ask, because you brought it up, what do you hope to gain, or what did you think was going to happen when I reached out to you and invited you here? And then what do you hope will happen now that you are here?
You know what? That was kind of what was exciting me about coming on, this podcast is you hit me up a while back when I was on Sam Seavey's YouTube channel. He interviewed me, and I was going to do an interview then, but then I had a lot of personal things come up. I had, my father passed, and I just kind of had to.
I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah, and
Sorry for your loss.
I had to put a lot of things on the back burner,
Of
including my
course.
podcast. So if you go check out my podcast and you see a gap in time, that's why.
Yeah.
So I'm back January 2nd. But I basically have been off the radar of podcasting for a while. So when you reached back out recently, I realized I never really had a chance to check out your podcast. And then you were like, "Can you do it today?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, 5:00." And so that's kind of what excited me. It's like I have no idea what this podcast is going to be like. And your questions, to be honest with you, are great. And they almost stump me, to be honest with you. So I'm
I
having a good
appreciate it.
time.
Well, that's all that matters. And that's really the point is I hope in a philosophical sense I hope to stump the guest because so that way we can really get to the core of the matter. Really try to start solving some of these problems that are going on around the disability community, not just in the blindness community, but really all over the disability community. So, what are some of your future? I guess what would be your dream project that if you could create a dream project or your dream documentary to fully produce, what would that be? Do you think?
Dream project. To be honest, my dream project is the See Through podcast, just on a grander scale. I guess the dream would be to have my own studio, where I have in-person interviews versus, remote interviews. I loved it, to get into that kind of, to have that amount of success. Just have a larger following, listener group, and higher quality videos, interviews, and content being put out. Maybe a small team helping me, because right now I am doing everything.
Yeah.
And just kind of grow and just kind of have a grander scale of the See Through podcast. But I really would, I'm being completely honest, I would say the See Through podcast is my dream project. So I think that's why it makes it easy for me to work on it, because I'm very passionate about it. And yeah, and it kind of surprised me, to be honest with you, how much I enjoyed it, how much I enjoy podcasting. But on a different note, if I didn't talk about the podcast, I would probably want to make some sort of comedy film, narrative, just really silly comedy featuring, some of my favorite comedic actors or comedians, and just kind of have fun. Like I had a conversation recently where I was like, not just because I have a disability doesn't mean that everything I do has to be about a disability. I can make I can make art that has nothing to do with RP or disability. So I would say it's either my podcast, which is heavily about disabilities, or I would do something completely unrelated and just kind of funny and fun.
Wonderful. Yeah, I really like that answer. I mean, I think that my podcast, Aaron's Opinion, of course, it's about blindness, but mostly it's about society, right? Because we're two people in society. So podcasting is not really philosophically speaking about the content that we produce as much as it is about us expressing the society around us. So there's no real disability podcast. There's a podcast in society that talks about disability. That's how I view it. It's all about society. That's why we all listen. That's why people are willing to listen, because there's some listener that can relate to it. But I really appreciated that answer. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
But yeah, I mean, for me, the podcast is definitely my dream project. You mentioned, having a team. Well, I don't know. I've never had one of those team things. I'm more, as you may be able to tell, I'm kind of an individualistic, kind of a uh, eccentric, individualistic type of person where I can tell you, I don't know if you want a team, who's on your team. It could be very helpful or it could be very hurtful. So you never know, if that would truly be easier for you to have a team
That's
or
why they need
not.
to figure out cloning, man, because then you could have, your own team of yourself.
So do you? What's your? Wait a minute. Oh, I'm gonna squeeze it out of you. I didn't think I would be bringing it up, but you brought. Okay, you fell for it. So what's your opinion about? Oh, I've never asked this question. If you had the opportunity tomorrow to upload your consciousness to the cloud so that you would live forever, would you do it?
How safe is it in the cloud?
Eh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
And whose cloud is it? I guess is what I.
Oh, I guess it's my cloud. I don't know. I thought I owned a cloud up there somewhere. Somewhere. It's right over here. I think I see it up there in the corner. Yeah, that cloud right in the do you see it up here top right corner? That cloud. Aaron's opinion cloud.
If it was your cloud, I trust you. I would probably do it.
You shouldn't trust you shouldn't trust me that quick. We've never met. What are you doing trusting me this quickly? You don't even know my backstory.
Well, you know what? Yeah. You're right,
Whoa,
man.
whoa, that was scary. You trust me that quickly? I didn't know I was that convincing. Okay.
Well, I'll say this: I trust you more than I would trust like China's cloud.
Okay, you know what?
So
Fine.
that's my point. Yeah.
Fine, but you know what? You know what? I would trust you with $1 million more than I would trust China with $1 million. The problem is we can't really make the comparison. It's hard to compare. But okay, you would trust me. But again, let's try to
Well,
get
the
an answer.
consciousness, does that mean I'd have to know exactly what would people would be able to know? Because it's kind of ironic, and I'm saying this because my podcast is built on transparency, but there is a lot of things in your brain that, hey, maybe you don't want that stuff out there. So um maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I just want to be old school. Maybe I want to be I'd rather be considered a caveman than like someone from the future. Maybe just leave me. Just consider me prehistoric. Actually, I'm changing my answer. I wouldn't do it. And yeah, I just think it changes things too much.
Yeah.
And there's actually, people always think about the future being, the future being like in the movies, like the future is fun, all fun and the technologies. And, if we have a future that long, it's like, maybe the future is, darker and, less appealing than, life now. And knowing that you have a death date, I think does affect your mindset and it helps you do appreciate things more. If you knew life was infinite, then you're probably not going to work as hard. You're not going to push yourself as hard. You're not going to soak in moments. You're like, it's fine. The sunset tonight's pretty, but whatever. I'll see a million other ones. So I don't know. I guess I'm in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand why people would want to do it though if they, God forbid, maybe had some horrible illness, maybe, or as a young person, maybe if they got sick and passed away and kind of wanted a more of a chance. I
Uh-huh.
could see where people would get this idea, but I don't know if it would ever really come to fruition. But
What would it be? The consciousness be downloaded into like a robot, or would it be like a human?
I don't know. I'm not the one who's studying it, but there are people who are studying it and are trying to figure out how to do it. So it could be both or either, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what's weirder to have a consciousness implanted into a robot or to have a consciousness implanted into a human.
Well, it's like, yeah, where do you get the human? Is it like a lab created human being? You're just a body. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Hmm. I think you need to make a movie. I think you really, really need to make a movie because you started to come up with stuff I've never even thought of that. Um,
And you have a say on, the appearance or
yeah,
physical attributes, and like it gets kind of complicated. And I think we're kind of getting close to the subject of like, um, gene therapy and whatnot.
right,
So like, there's a controversy with that. Let's say I was born with RP, right? And I'm
right,
happy I'm here. I wouldn't want to be, let's say it's in the future and there's a way that my parents were able to kind of look at all the different, you know, uh, I don't know what it's called, but let's just say possible outcomes for children. And they looked at my fertilized egg and they were like, this child will be born with retinitis pigmentosa. And then my parents were like, let's do another one that, let's keep doing it. Cause my genetic probability of me having RP was 50-50 and my children have a 50-50 shot. So it'd be like me or my parents, having the knowledge of, will my child have RP or some sort of other disability, and being able to basically change it. And then, I wouldn't be here, so I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. Um, I have mixed feelings on it, but I think it's definitely should be explored. And I encourage, the scientific community to keep working on it. But at the same time, uh, not sure exactly how I feel about it, or, uh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know how we got there. I don't know how we got to that question, but that was an interesting twist. That's the beauty of podcasting is that we ask these crazy questions sometimes, and then we hear information that we didn't. You surprised me. It didn't occur to me that we would cover that. But
Yeah,
I
see,
think
that's what I was saying. You ask these questions, man. You ask these questions that get these answers. I'm liking it, man. It's fun.
that was weird. That was weird. I
I
forgot
can
what.
get weird, man.
Well, you don't know me, remember?
Yeah.
But no, I think it's a really I think that there are a lot of people around the disability community that have asked the question, what if, why me? So I think a lot of people ask that, and it's a very interesting thing. For me, I go, you prefer to go back to the wisdom of cavemen, which I think that's a tremendously wise thing to say. I'll go a little bit closer in history to something that Samuel Clemens once said. There are 2 days that are important in our lives: the day we're born and the day we know why. So I think that there is a purpose for every person, and that there's a purpose for having disability. There's a purpose, and we need to love it. And that's really what I think about that.
Oh, I
But
love that.
but I hate to disappoint you. There's a lot of research that's being done and a lot of money spent. So probably someone will manage to upload something to some cloud somewhere. People just won't stop trying. This is the craziness of mankind, is that we just don't stop trying. So, but of course, I'm suspicious. I have about 10, 12 minutes, 10 minutes ish, about 12 minutes. And I always like to say that uh, we really covered a lot of things that I really appreciate, and I really love your perspective on life. But I've asked you questions. I want you to ask all of your questions. So, what do you want to know about Aaron Richmond? What do you want to know about Aaron's opinion? And don't say that you're too nervous, because someone who's a film director has to interview people.
All right, all right. You asked me a good question. I don't want to ask you just a softball question. I'm gonna try to ask you a
Even better.
heavy
You should
hitter.
you should try to you should try to I would love it if you could ask me, and even try to stump me. I would love that.
All right, all right.
Let's take. Here, I tell you what. Here, let's help out. We need some coffee for this one. I can already feel it coming on.
All right, all right. So
Hmm.
I'll ask you. You have this you have a disability, you have a podcast, and you have a voice to speak about your disability and your very own perspective of it. Your audience, who you talked about it earlier, is, you know, from everywhere. You know, some people have disabilities, some people don't. Um, I'm going to assume your audience is like mine, and most of my audience members have a disability. Why do you think it's so hard to speak about disabilities and get people without them to listen?
It's hard to speak about disability and getting sighted people or non disabled people to listen for two reasons. One, a lot of people don't have confidence in themselves. A lot of people don't believe in themselves and believe that they can. And when you believe that you can, you start creating podcasts and you start creating. The other thing that happens is everybody else around you tells you you cannot. And then the sad thing is, people believe it. And the people who are not disabled, it's hard to get people without a disability to listen because they feel that it would never happen to them. They feel that they could never be blind or that they could never have a disability. Well, you're living proof, and so many people are. You can be born sighted and then have a disability. So that's why people should believe in themselves. They should know that they can, and they should speak up and not listen to other people who tell them that they cannot. And that the people who are listening should know that it could be you. You could go blind. There's a lot of, Lance, there's so many ways. I had someone who went blind because they got hit over the head with a brick. I had someone who went blind because they shot their eye out with a thumbtack thing. Those things you put on the posters on what's the board? A board on a poster. Those little thumbtacks you hang pictures up, you can flick one of those thumbtacks into your eye hard enough and become blind. I've had someone got bit by a mosquito and the mosquito gave them a disease and the disease managed to get into their bloodstream and affected their optic nerve or their eye or something like that.
Yeah.
Point is, you could be next. It could be you. And this is the greatest point, is that sighted people really, I know this is offensive, but I'm telling you, I'm pleased to offend you. I'm pleased to tell you that sighted people think they're invincible. That's a lie.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I agree. And I think, they say that, and it's not they say, but it is true. Like, the disability community is the only minority that anyone can join.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I can tell you love humor and love comedy because there's a lot of jokes that have been done about that. And I can tell you know what some of those jokes are. I don't want to get too distracted because you can tell I love to laugh. I love the comedy too. But I wanted to ask you though, because when I watch films, I really watch science fiction, very serious films, very firm films, very calm films. Comedy, I hate to offend you, Lance, but I'm pleased to offend you to let you know that comedy for me, it's a real yawn. It really bores me when it's in a film. So what do you love about comedy in a film? Is it that you just love to laugh and that you think that's healthy for you?
Oh, I love to laugh. And, so you mentioned specifically film, right? I prefer, my favorite medium of comedy is stand-up comedy. I'll say that.
Oh, yeah.
I go to stand-up shows all the time here in New York. But when it comes to films, when you grow up in North Carolina, small town, there's not really comedy clubs you're going to be going to as like an 8-year-old. So, in general. And so you kind of have to get your comedy through, TV shows or movies.
Right.
Or recorded stand-up specials, you have those. But movies were always, that's the crowd favorite, man. Everyone loves movies. And I just love seeing grown men goof off and in a creative way, in a smart and intelligent way, and have a humor that can go over people's heads sometimes. And some people laugh, some people don't. I love how there's all different styles of comedy, and sometimes I like to show people a comedy that I know they don't like, because I want to see them not like it, just to kind of feel the awkwardness in
Mm-hmm.
the room.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
sometimes,
no, that would be for me. I would rather be
yeah, yeah.
awkward than be funny. Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
just so comedy, it's just it's lighthearted, especially if you have like, the older you get, the more responsibilities you have, the more stresses you have. You got to remember to laugh. And if if you're not going to make yourself laugh, then you got to let other people make you laugh. So if you're not around anyone making you laugh, you got to find a way to laugh. And comedy films are just one way to do that.
That's a really good. You really defined comedy. You really get it, and I really appreciate it. I like comedy in a film when the film is super serious and super philosophical, and then there's something super funny but very self-deprecating, kind of
Mm-hmm.
low-key comedy, like kind of hovering around in the background where you think you watch the whole film and then you go home and you laugh really hard, like, oh my god, I didn't realize that was that funny at that time, but that was actually really
Yeah.
like how do I even express it to you? I like comedy. I love laughing. I love jokes. But
Yeah.
in like um I don't want to name drop, but in kind of a serious British sort of way, dry-ish is how
Yeah.
I view
I,
it.
I could see that. After
That's kind
talking to you for an hour, I could take you as a dry humor
of
kind of
you
person.
could take me. You could. I could take you as dry humor. I could take you as dry. Oh, there you go. That's the title. I could take you as dry humor. That sounded weird. That sounded cool. Okay. Well, so good. So good. So good. Before I forget who I am. Okay. If you can ask me only one. Yeah. Only one more. Yeah. Our timing's pretty close. Pretty good. All right. So let's go. Let's go with this. Let's see. I want you to ask me only one more question. One really good question to make me worth my sweat, to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster. Go.
All right. All right. Um, let's see. Again, I want to ask you a good one. When it comes to, and this is me, I'm just throwing one out there. You know, there's two sides of a disability, and I like to talk about the mental side, but there's also the physical side of a mental disability. You have, um, there's invisible disabilities and whatnot, but you know, let's just take an example. We both wear glasses, right?
We do.
So when it comes to the physical side of a disability, um, what do you think, in a world, if everyone was visually impaired and no one could see, you know, do you think that people would care about, the physical nature of things?
In other words, you're wondering if the entire world was blind, would we have physical feeling?
Yeah, what we care about superficial things as much as we do in terms of appearance or aesthetic of
Sure.
like
I get it. I think that's a beautiful question. I think the answer is of course we would, only because I know that people are very we as a species are very self-centered and arrogant and boastful as a species. So of course we would still care about that, because that would be human nature, unless of course you're alluding to the fact, and you are not, but unless you're saying that the disability would impact human nature as a species, then maybe we would care. But if it leaves the human nature factor out of it, I think that we would be the same. We would be just as eccentric and just as strange and just as caring about appearance as ever, just in our own. We would redefine appearance, handsomeness, sexy, sexuality, these things would be redefined, is
yeah,
what
yeah.
would actually happen. So that was a lot of great content, man. A lot of interesting stuff. If someone, and you've been a magnificent guest as always, by the way, but if someone wants to get in touch with, Lance Johnson, how do they contact you? What are all of your links, and where are some good places to find you?
Yeah. You can find me basically everywhere. The website for the podcast is theseethroughpod.com. My social media handle is at seethroughpod. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. And then you can find me on YouTube. Just search for the See Through Podcast. I have 49 episodes out. And again, I'm coming out with new episodes weekly starting January 2nd. And, my personal handle on social media is at Lance, Lance, Kestrel, Kestrel. So, or you can email me, the seethroughpodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM me on social media, whichever one, and I will get back to you. So yeah, there's lots of ways to find me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor interviewing you. And
Thank you, man.
yeah, and
Likewise.
thanks.
You let me interview you a little bit.
Well, that's part of a great episode, I hope and think. So, well, thanks so much. We'll see you guys next time. And of course, take care, and you're always welcome. So, great episode.